Have you ever felt like you're watching everyone else find peace, purpose, and a sense of higher meaning while you're just stuck? Like everyone's evolving spiritually, but you're standing still, trying to figure out where you lost your way. That quiet, sinking feeling that maybe something inside you is wrong or missing. That's where Carl Jung's insights become almost eerily relevant. Because Jung didn't see that feeling as failure, he saw it as a message, a sign that the psyche, or soul, is trying to get your attention. We live in a time where spiritual growth is treated like a checklist. Meditate, manifest, be grateful, avoid low vibrations. And when you can't keep up with all that, it feels like you're falling behind on some invisible scoreboard of enlightenment. But here's what Jung would tell you. Real spiritual growth doesn't look like constant calm or eternal clarity. It often looks like confusion, emptiness, and the terrifying collapse of everything that once made sense. It looks like losing your direction because the path you were on was never really yours. Jung believed that the psyche has its own intelligence, one that's far older and wiser than the conscious mind. And when that deeper part of you wants change, it doesn't politely ask. It breaks things. It pulls away what's fake, what's borrowed, what doesn't belong. So when you feel lost or spiritually disconnected, it's not proof that you've failed. It might actually mean you're finally ready to move beyond illusions, the ones you didn't even know you were living under. There's a moment Jung often described when the old ego begins to fall apart. The ego is the identity you've built up over time, the stories you tell yourself about who you are and what makes life meaningful. It's like the surface structure of a house, but if the foundation underneath has shifted, no matter how well you decorate, the cracks will show. The ego tries to maintain stability. The soul, however, demands truth, and truth doesn't care how comfortable your walls are. Think about it. Every major inner shift you've had probably began with discomfort. You lost something or someone. You questioned what you believed. You felt small, uncertain. That's the psyche beginning its own quiet rebellion. Jung called it individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, not who you were told to be. And it doesn't begin when life feels smooth. It begins in the friction. When you feel spiritually stuck, you're often caught between two worlds, the one your ego knows and the one your soul is trying to reveal. You might sense it as an inner split, part of you wanting safety, another part whispering that there's more. Jung would say that's the moment the unconscious begins to rise. It's not an enemy, it's you, just the parts you've ignored, forgotten, or exiled. But here's the paradox. We fear the unconscious because it feels dark, unknown, and yet that's where the light of transformation hides. Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." So when you feel like you're spiritually behind, maybe it's because you're in the very phase that no one talks about, the descent, the soul's descent into shadow. The shadow, in Jung's words, is everything within us that we refuse to acknowledge. Our envy, our anger, our doubts, our pettiness. The traits we deny because they don't fit the spiritual image we've built. But pretending they don't exist doesn't make them disappear. It makes them control us from the dark. The real spiritual journey isn't about becoming pure. It's about becoming whole. And wholeness means facing contradiction. You can be kind and still hold rage. You can be spiritual and still feel lost. You can have faith and still question everything. Jung would say that your soul isn't asking you to erase your darkness. It's asking you to integrate it, to see that even your confusion has a purpose. Because the more you resist your inner chaos, the more it drags you under. But when you turn toward it, something miraculous happens. It begins to reveal what it was trying to teach you. Imagine standing at the edge of a forest at night. You can't see the path ahead. Every instinct says, stay in the light, stay safe. But Jung would tell you, the treasure you seek lies in that forest. You can't find yourself by staying where it's comfortable. And you don't need to see the whole path, just the courage to take the next step in the dark. It's in that darkness that your old identities start to crumble. Maybe the spiritual version of you that always had answers starts to fade. Maybe the confident seeker who once felt in tune with everything now feels disconnected. And that disconnection is painful. It feels like failure. But Jung would say it's actually the moment your soul starts stripping away masks. The persona, as he called it, is the face you show the world. And for many of us, spirituality becomes another mask, a way to look peaceful while avoiding pain. But true spirituality, Jung believed, doesn't shield you from pain. It draws you deeper into it, not to suffer endlessly, but to understand it, to find meaning in it. The wound becomes the place where the light enters, as Rumi put it. Jung agreed. He said that the experience of suffering is what opens the way to the self, the deeper, timeless center within you that holds both light and dark. Here's what's strange. Most people try to awaken by adding things, new habits, new teachings, new affirmations. But Jung's path is the opposite. You awaken by subtraction, by unlearning everything that was built on fear or imitation. You stop trying to become someone better and start meeting the person you already are. That's what individuation really means, reconciling all your inner opposites until you become whole. Maybe you've been feeling disconnected because you're still trying to live according to an old idea of what spirituality should look like. Maybe your soul's growth doesn't look peaceful. It looks like grief or emptiness or the collapse of beliefs you once held sacred. Jung saw that collapse as sacred too, because the self, the deeper center of your being, can only emerge when the old ego dies. It's a psychological death, the kind where what you thought mattered stops mattering. You lose motivation for things that once made you feel alive. You start questioning everything, even your own identity. That's not regression, it's initiation. The ancient myths called it descent into the underworld. Jung saw it as a universal pattern of transformation. To rise, you must first go down. He studied countless myths and dreams and realized they all shared this rhythm. The hero must lose their way, face their shadow, and surrender before they can return transformed. So, if you're in that place, lost, uncertain, disconnected, understand this: you're not off the path. You're in the middle of it. You're living the part no one posts about. The truth is, there's no such thing as falling behind spiritually. There's only resistance to where you are right now. Jung would say that the psyche has perfect timing. If you're not progressing, it's because something inside you needs to be understood before it can move. You're being asked to slow down, to listen inwardly instead of chasing external signs of progress. And that's hard, because the modern world rewards visible growth. You can track your fitness, your followers, even your meditation streaks. But spiritual growth isn't linear. It's cyclical. You expand, you contract, you awaken, you fall asleep again. Each phase has meaning. Each return to darkness isn't failure, it's refinement. Jung used the symbol of the mandala, a circle divided into patterns, to represent the psyche's movement toward wholeness. Life keeps turning that circle. You revisit the same wounds from different angles, each time with more awareness. That's how real transformation happens, not in sudden leaps, but in spirals. So, if you're feeling lost, maybe you're exactly where you need to be. The soul works in paradox. It breaks you open not to destroy you, but to make room for something more real to emerge. And maybe, just maybe, the feeling of being spiritually behind is the first whisper of awakening itself. The moment your old self begins to crumble and something ancient within you starts to stir. You can't rush that. You can't control it. You can only surrender to it, because every collapse is followed by a revelation. Every silence hides a message, and every moment of emptiness is the space where something true is waiting to be born. When you stop trying to become spiritual and start allowing yourself to be human, that's when the real journey begins. We spend so much time chasing light that we forget how much wisdom hides in the dark. Jung understood this better than most. He knew that the psyche isn't trying to keep us stuck. It's trying to balance us. When you feel spiritually disconnected, it's not that you've lost your light. It's that your inner world is trying to restore equilibrium. You've leaned too far into one side, too much positivity, too much control, too much idealism. And now the other side, the neglected one, demands to be seen. Imagine the soul like a pendulum. It swings toward clarity, then back into confusion, toward meaning, then back into emptiness. You're not supposed to fix the movement. You're supposed to understand it. Jung called this the tension of opposites. The psyche evolves not by choosing one side, but by holding both until something new emerges. A third thing, a synthesis. That's how consciousness grows, not by denying darkness, but by containing it without being consumed. He once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." And that's the part no one warns you about. Spiritual progress isn't a series of peaceful mountaintops. It's a series of deaths. You lose illusions, attachments, even versions of yourself you once loved. It hurts. But that pain is the friction that generates awareness. Without it, nothing changes. Many people mistake spiritual numbness for failure. They think, if I were evolving, I'd feel connected, inspired, full of love. But Jung would say that numbness is often the psyche's way of pausing the ego's frantic striving. When you feel empty, it's not because there's nothing left inside. It's because the soul is silently clearing the space for something new to take root. The old patterns have run their course. You just haven't met the next version of yourself yet. That's why Jung urged people to pay attention to their dreams. He believed the unconscious communicates through symbols and stories, showing us the next steps long before we consciously understand them. The dream might seem random, a forgotten room, a wild animal, a storm, but each image is a fragment of your own inner landscape. When you ignore those messages, life has to send stronger ones. So the feeling of being spiritually behind might just be life turning up the volume on a message you've been missing. Maybe your energy feels blocked because your life no longer matches your inner truth. Maybe your work, your relationships, even your beliefs are out of sync with the person you're becoming. Jung called this psychic dissonance, and it's one of the clearest signs that transformation is underway. The soul creates discomfort, not to punish you, but to push you toward authenticity. But authenticity isn't as glamorous as people make it sound. It's raw, lonely. It strips you of the comfort of pretending. And yet once you taste it, you can't go back. That's the moment Jung would say the self begins to awaken, the deeper center within you that isn't trapped by roles, identities, or expectations. It's the part of you that watches everything crumble and knows, somehow, that you'll still be here when the dust settles. Here's something we rarely talk about. Spiritual maturity is not about how high you can ascend. It's about how deep you can descend without losing faith. Jung often compared the journey to alchemy. In alchemy, the base metal must first be dissolved in darkness before it can be transformed into gold. He saw this as a perfect metaphor for the psyche. You can't skip the dissolving. The ego must break down so the true self can crystallize. And that process doesn't happen once. It happens over and over, each time at a deeper level. That's why spiritual life often feels cyclical. You think you've healed something, and then it returns, more intense, more personal. It's not regression, it's refinement. The psyche keeps revisiting old material because there's more gold to extract. The goal isn't to end the cycle, it's to become conscious within it. Think of it like this. Life keeps offering you the same lesson until you stop reacting automatically and start responding consciously. when you can face pain without running, when you can sit with emptiness without filling it, when you can acknowledge fear without letting it dictate your choices. That's transformation. Jung would say that's when the opposites within you begin to unite and a new kind of strength emerges. He saw the self not as a distant ideal, but as a living center guiding us toward wholeness, sometimes through synchronicities, those strange coincidences that feel too meaningful to be random, other times through crisis. When the conscious and unconscious collide, outer events often mirror inner conflict. You lose a job right when you're questioning your purpose. A relationship ends just as you realize how much of yourself you'd given away. The timing feels cruel, but from Jung's view, it's exact. The psyche orchestrates events that force awareness. So, when everything starts falling apart, ask yourself, what truth have I been avoiding? What new part of me is trying to emerge? The ego experiences it as loss, but the self sees it as birth. The old structure must dissolve for the new one to take form. That's why so many people experience a dark night of the soul. It's not depression in the clinical sense, it's the breakdown of meaning. The spiritual scaffolding collapses, leaving you in a kind of void. Nothing feels sacred anymore. Jung would say this void is not absence, it's potential. The old gods die so that a new image of the divine can be born within you. He believed that modern humanity suffers not from a lack of spirituality, but from an outdated one. The symbols that once carried meaning no longer speak to the modern mind. So the psyche creates new myths through our dreams, art, and crises. That's what's happening when you feel lost. You're between stories. The old myth has ended, but the new one hasn't fully appeared. And this is where most people panic. They cling to the old symbols, repeat old affirmations, or chase quick fix enlightenment to escape the uncertainty. But Jung would tell you, don't rush to fill the void. Stay with it. The psyche needs time to show you what's next. The new meaning will emerge not through effort, but through patience, observation, and honesty. He once said, the sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light in the darkness of mere being. Notice, he didn't say escape the darkness. He said kindle a light within it. That's what spiritual growth truly is, not transcending your humanity, but illuminating it from the inside out. Maybe that's why you felt so behind, because you've been trying to reach a destination that doesn't exist. Spirituality isn't a finish line. It's a conversation between your conscious self and your deeper being that never ends. And the pauses, the silences, the confusion, they're all part of that dialogue. There's an image Jung used that I always come back to. He said the self is like a seed hidden in the soil of the unconscious. The ego wants to bloom instantly. It wants proof, progress, recognition. But the seed grows in darkness first. It breaks apart before it sprouts. It doesn't know where it's going. It just follows an ancient instinct toward the light. That's what you're doing, even if it doesn't feel like it right now. So when you feel spiritually stagnant, remember this. Maybe nothing's gone wrong. Maybe you're simply underground, dissolving into the soil, becoming ready for something that can't yet be named. Because the truth is, growth rarely feels like growth when it's happening. It feels like loss, confusion, silence. But that silence is sacred. It's the pause before a new voice begins to speak from within. And if you can learn to trust that process, to let the darkness teach you, instead of fearing it, you'll find that what you thought was an ending was really the beginning of something vast, ancient, and profoundly your own. There's a certain kind of silence that arrives when you stop running from yourself, from answers, from progress. At first, it feels unbearable. You reach for distractions, old habits, anything to fill the void. But when you finally sit still long enough, that silence starts to hum. Something begins to speak in a language you forgot you knew. That voice, That's what Jung called the self. It's not loud. It's ancient, patient, and always waiting for you to stop pretending you're in control. You see, the modern mind worships clarity. We want every question to have an answer, every doubt to resolve neatly into insight. But the psyche doesn't move in straight lines. It moves like nature, through seasons. Sometimes your inner world is spring, everything blooming and alive. Other times, it's winter, bare, frozen, quiet, and no amount of effort can force spring to return before its time. Jung would tell you that the spiritual path requires trust in those inner seasons. The death of meaning isn't the end of the cycle, it's part of the renewal. So, if you're in that winter, don't try to dig yourself out too quickly. Let the ground be still. Let things die that need to die. Because what's growing underneath will only emerge when the surface has quieted enough to let it. The psyche works best in mystery. It doesn't need your constant supervision. It needs your faith in its intelligence. Here's something Jung hinted at, though he rarely said it outright. The unconscious doesn't just contain darkness. It also contains guidance, what he called the transcendent function. It's the psyche's ability to create bridges between opposites, to find a path through conflict. But this function only activates when you stop trying to control everything, when you hold both sides of a contradiction, your hope and your despair, your love and your anger. Something new begins to form in between. That's why Jung said, real transformation feels less like effort and more like surrender. The more you push for awakening, the more it retreats. The more you let yourself not know, the more it approaches quietly, like dawn sneaking into a dark room. And that's the thing. Spiritual progress isn't about adding light. It's about discovering that the light was always there, hidden inside the darkness you were trying to avoid. Think of how the moon doesn't shine on its own. It reflects the sun. In the same way, your consciousness doesn't need to generate light. It only needs to turn toward the source that's already within you. Jung believed that the soul speaks through symbols because the conscious mind can't handle truth in its raw form. So instead, it gives us images, patterns, synchronicities, little mirrors of meaning scattered through daily life. The book that falls open to the exact line you needed. The stranger who says something that echoes a thought you had last night. The song that plays at the perfect time. He called these moments a causal, meaning they're not connected by logic, but by significance. The universe communicating through the fabric of your experience. If you pay attention, you'll start to notice these quiet alignments more often when you're not fighting yourself. They don't show up to prove anything. They show up to remind you that even when you feel lost, you're still inside a larger pattern. The self is always guiding, always moving you toward wholeness, even through confusion, especially through confusion. Jung had this deep respect for the paradox of human nature. He knew that the soul's growth isn't about choosing between good and bad, but reconciling them. He once said that every light casts a shadow, and every shadow hints at light. The goal isn't to become all light, it's to become aware enough to hold both without being torn apart. And that's a hard truth for most seekers to swallow, because we love the idea of transcendence. We want to rise above pain, not walk through it. But if you skip the descent, your ascent is hollow. You end up floating above life instead of living it. Jung saw this happen to many people, those who clung to spiritual ideals as a way of avoiding their own wounds. He called it spiritual inflation. It looks enlightened on the surface, but underneath, it's just another disguise for fear. Real integration means coming down to earth. It means letting yourself feel ordinary again. It means realizing that the divine isn't somewhere up there. It's right here, in the sweat and the mess and the contradictions. Jung's entire philosophy rests on that divinity is hidden in the depths of the psyche, not floating somewhere above it. The more human you become, the closer you come to the divine. And that's why falling behind spiritually is impossible. Because your humanity is the very soil of your awakening. The confusion, the struggle, the despair, they're not detours. They're sacred ground. You can't separate your spiritual life from your ordinary life. Every conflict, every heartbreak, every doubt is the psyche's way of sculpting you into someone capable of containing more consciousness. The secret, Jung would say, is to stop thinking of spirituality as escape and start seeing it as embodiment. Enlightenment isn't floating above your pain. It's learning to feel it without being destroyed by it. It's letting life shape you until your heart becomes vast enough to hold both the beauty and the brutality of existence. There's a kind of quiet power that comes when you stop needing to be special or wise or enlightened and just let yourself be real. Jung called that state being in accord with oneself. When your inner and outer life match, even if they're imperfect, there's peace. That peace doesn't come from getting rid of your flaws. It comes from no longer lying about them. Sometimes, the most spiritual thing you can do is to admit, I don't know, to sit in the question without forcing an answer. Because in that space, the unconscious begins to speak. Slowly, symbols turn into insights. Insights turn into change, and change turns into understanding. Not the kind you read in books, but the kind that settles into your bones. You realize you were never meant to reach a fixed state of enlightenment. The point was always to deepen, to keep growing more conscious, more whole, more human. The soul doesn't care about perfection. It cares about honesty. It doesn't need your achievements. It needs your attention. So if you've been feeling spiritually behind, pause, breathe, look around you. Notice the small things, the way the sunlight moves across the room, the sound of your breath, the faint pulse under your skin. That's life. That's spirit. That's the self, whispering, you're not behind, you're becoming. The journey isn't upward or forward, it's inward. And the deeper you go, the more you'll see that the divine you've been chasing has been moving toward you the entire time. Maybe that's the greatest irony of all, that the moment you stop trying to catch up is the moment you finally arrive.